What's up everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Rosendo and today we're going to be taking a look at another one of my tracks today. We're going to be breaking down my first single, Low. Now I mentioned last time that my Fake ID Tech House remix was kind of my first track, but since it was an unofficial remix, it was just posted to SoundCloud and obviously it didn't get posted to Spotify. So this single that we're going to take a look at today, Low, I consider it my first single. I kind of consider it my debut track. It was the one that kicks off my Spotify. It was the first one that got distributed to all platforms. So this is pretty much what I consider to be my first track. Again, Fake ID Remix, great track. Not really my first because it doesn't kick off my discography. This one I do consider it. So we're going to be taking a look at Low. It is a bass house track, very minimalistic. Again, we'll get into all the details. But make sure to like the video if you enjoy what you see. We're going to have more breakdowns of all my tracks coming soon. And let's get straight into it. Alright, so here we are back in FL Studio. Right off the bat, you can see this project file looks a little bit different. I think I might take my time a little bit more explaining this track because if you saw the previous video, two things. Real quick, number one, you should see mini meters up in the corner. That should be working. I had the wrong audio source selected last time. That should be there from now on unless I make that mistake again. But anyways, number two, you'll see right off the bat, you see all these patterns over here on the left side. If you're new to music production or if you don't know kind of how music production works, these patterns pretty much make up your song, right? You have samples, like a kick drum, and you have your patterns that actually are, the instruments, or in this case, the synths that you hear. So if you saw my Fake ID remix breakdown, you saw that there were like 4 patterns, and I think 2 of them weren't even used. One of them was an effect and a bunch of other stuff. Here we actually have more patterns. And again, for a minimalistic track, there's not that many. In my future tracks, I mean, even as soon as next track, you'll see that there are going to be a lot more. But for now, we're looking at these patterns on the left side here. Again, there's going to be a lot, and I think I'm going to take my time to break this track down a little bit more because I made it from scratch. There's no acapellas. It's not a remix that I made from, even the other one I technically made from scratch, but it all kind of revolved around an acapella. Here, I literally started with nothing and had to make the track. Versus in the remix, I started with an acapella. Now, a little bit about the track before we get into it. This track Low was again meant to be my debut single, and I wanted it to be a minimalistic track. I was going from a tech house track to another track. I wanted it also to be house, so this track was crafted intentionally to be my debut single. Now, after this, I did a full 180 and went into the more melodic stuff that I really like, that you'll see next video in Exposition, or you can just listen to it on my Spotify or any other streaming platform. But again, I wanted to go into a house track. In this case, we're looking at kind of bass house, very minimalistic, very kind of chill. Not much going on as far as aggressiveness goes or, heavy bass goes. But I want it to be, I want it to have some groove to it. And one of the funny things about this track is, if you're a producer, starting a track, well, maybe everyone's a little bit different, but in my case, starting a track I actually find to be really, really hard unless I have an inspiration of some sort. Oh, I really like this chord progression, or I really like this sound that I want to use as an atmosphere, or I found an acapella or something like that. Whenever I just sit down in front of my computer and I think, you know what, today I'm going to make a track, it never works out. Never. It's never worked out before. I always need some sort of inspiration, something to kind of build up on. Never has it worked. Except for this track. This is the only track where I sat down. I realized I had a bunch of melodic tracks already written and kind of produced, but I didn't want it to be my debut single. I wanted something a little bit more listenable, if that's a word, to be my debut single. So I sat down. I thought, you know what? I need to make a track. I'm sitting down. I'm going to make a track right now, and this is the only time it worked. And it's representative, and it will be clear in a second because it's a very minimalistic track. It's one note for 2 minutes and 24 seconds. We'll get into that, and then it changes notes, but you'll see really quickly. Technically, there's actually some more notes right here, but you'll see in a second. So again, this was crafted to be my debut single, to be listenable, and just to have a little bit of fun. So we go right off into the intro, bass house track. So drum, very kind of mellow intro, almost a little bit dark. All you really have here are 3 things. Number 1, a kick. Number 2, some noise. You can hardly hear that because it's very, very quiet, but it's there. I don't want to turn it up, but I'll turn it up so you can hear what it is. This is what that is. And this kind of pad that I made. I actually made a video on TikTok about how I made this sound. It's very simple, and I have everything muted. It's very simple, but a little bit of kickstart, a little bit of distortion. Looks like I EQ'd some of the lows. If you want to check it out, it's on TikTok. It's super simple. But what is this? So it looks like a sine wave, another almost DS saw tri filtered, and that's pretty much it. Do I have a flanger EQ, a few things. But again, dark intro. We're getting straight into it with the kick. The kick is there. The intro, the kind of the tone of the pad is there. It's almost I titled it lighter ambience for some reason. I mean, sometimes my titles are a little bit arbitrary. It really just depends. So again, you hear that intro, it sets the tone right off the bat. Pretty dark. You know you're kind of getting yourself into something. Kick comes in. 2 kicks. Tight clap. A little bit more full, layered on top of each other. Nothing crazy, and it has a really standard bass house intro. This track is, since it's minimalistic, it needs that progression, something I talked about last time. It just always needs to feel like it's moving forward. Get the kick, clap, and that's pretty much all you have right now. The tone hasn't changed. It's still the same atmosphere, still the same noise. Hi-hats come in, another clap layer. Oh, it looks like this clap layer is actually a little bit more, has a little bit more groove to it. And actually, you can see real quick all the samples I've used. Most of them are effects. Obviously, you have the drums, but it's drums and effects, and it looks like there's one. What is this? Yeah. We'll get into that. But again, pretty standard intro. Hi-hats come in, double kick, basically a requirement. And then we get into the kind of first verse where we high pass a few things. Where we low pass a few things. So right here is where you get introduced to a few things. You get a little bit of noise, you get some effects. Number one, let's start with the most important thing. This simple bounce simple, right? There's a bunch of bounce patterns, so I labeled this one bounce simple. That's all it is. One note. It has some attack to it. It has almost that grittiness to it. And that's all you hear. Right there. Again, one note. I think this is C. Yeah, this track is in C, and this is kind of one of the things I was talking about earlier, where I sat down and I said I'm gonna make a track. But one of the things I did was I just played one note, one bass note, and just kind of felt that groove going, and that's how this track was built. Now you get a sub here, a little bit of kickstart. Actually need to make sure. You got a sub here, with some kickstart. You get these high pass kicks, high pass claps, and a new atmosphere, a pedal tone. Kind of arbitrary why I called it a pedal tone when the previous one is technically also they're all pedal tones. It's one note to some extent, but it's just new atmosphere. You go from this lighter one to this one, even though again it's lighter. Everything was kind of made in the moment, so don't worry about the pattern names too much. I mean, even this one's called Plucky, kind of. We'll get into that. But let's get to the meat of the track. Let's move forward. So you get this tone. Again, it's all about progression. You start with this intro. Things get low pass. You got some lows. I mean, the track is called Low. I'll talk about how I named it Low later. But again, you get some effects here. You actually get this really nice. You get some reverbs here. This is a really nice kind of effect that I found that really sets a nice, dark, mysterious tone in the track. You hear it. And we keep going forward to a build-up. Some snare fills, a few plucks here and there. You hear this. And some more effects that, again, make it feel dark and mysterious. Snares come in, build-ups coming in. Things are dropping, low passes dropping in a few places. And then the groove. Take a listen. So that's basically what we're going to be working with for the first part of the track. You can see why it's called Bounce Simple. Again, one note. This is what I started the track with. Boom, boom. And then, you get the build up, you get going, and then when you get to the drop, what do you want to do? You make a pattern out of it. So we get to the drop all the drums. You kind of let that bass line fill up the space. Let yourself, let the listener kind of adapt to what we're about to listen to, which is the groove. It's all about the groove here, minimalistic track. So we're going to make sure things revolve around that bass line. Here's that sample I was looking at earlier. That's on Holo 808. And again, this is that bass line you kind of have to set the tone, well, kind of to define the drop, to define what we're about to listen to. Anyways, little bit of a reverse effect right there. Claps come in. Take a listen to that bass line one more time, especially at the end. Does a really good job of transitioning from, just the beginning of the end of the bass line to the beginning again, but especially in areas like this, from, a relaxed area where the bass line is the attention, the main focus, to the drop when the drums kick in. Again, one more time. And kick. And then we get moving. So some noise effects. The noise actually plays a really important role because it fills in a lot of the spectrum. Again, for a minimalistic track, and also the first bass house track I made. Technically, we're going to call this bass house. For the first bass house track I made, the noise really just fills in the spectrum because there's not a lot going on here. And these drums are going to kick in a second and fill in the spectrum a little bit better. And there's going to be a little bit more on the second drop, but the noise is kind of crucial there to literally fill in the space. So we're looking at a kick, we're looking at a clap, we're looking at the same drum pattern we were looking at earlier. And then we get to the bass layer. Let's highlight this for a second. So this is what we're working with here. It's 3 patterns, the bounce you heard earlier, technically 4, the bounce you heard earlier, a saw layer on top of it, and a deep pattern that kind of gives it more of the lows. Let's take a listen to each one by one. Here we go. You have your main bounce that we talked about earlier, a saw wave, grittiness, a little bit of width as well, and a deeper one. All while the sub is playing with kickstart. A little bit about the mixing chain. There's a kickstart on here. It makes a big difference. It actually makes a huge difference. This is something I want to highlight. First of all, I mentioned in the last video, I love kickstart. I pretty much rely on it. I love the sidechain noise. Number 2, there's a lot of transients on the bass line that duck, obviously, when the kick comes in at every beat, technically. But the kickstart plays such an important role because without it, the bass line is really plucky and it's almost kind of too in your face. But with it, it's a lot more groovy and it feels like you're kind of getting that bass house element to it. So take a listen. Without it, that's literally it. All that pluck, all those transients. And then with it. Again, it makes it more dynamic too. Some of them have those transients, some of them don't. A little bit of EQ, some low pass for the sub. Looks like there's a compressor on this, decapitator for distortion. And this, I'm assuming, is just some corrective EQ. And then you have the sub. No, pretty much no mixing there. EQ and a kickstart. So back to the track. Again, you have those 3 elements that make the bass line more full. It's the main focus of the track. So all of them are there for the drop. Same drum pattern as earlier, pretty standard. But again, it's all about the movement. So you'll hear in a second these extra drums kick in with these effects that are going to kind of keep things moving forward, as I mentioned before. Drop the extra drums. And everything's in here. These had some really good movement on every bar. Every 2 bars, actually. Drop the drums, just the kick, and we stay moving forward. Now again, one of the things I talked about last time is that progression that some tracks have, some tracks don't, that I will always include in my tracks, at least for now. Take a listen to this first verse. Again, we're calling them verses, even though I'm not really sure what to call them. There's no vocals. I feel like typically the word verses is associated with vocals. Take a listen to this. Kick low passed. This is the hi-hats that are also low passed, and we get the simple bass line. Verse 2. Kick is not low passed. Bass line has that pattern to it. It's not the simple one we heard earlier, but it's the one we have at the drop. Atmosphere is still there. Little bit of noise here. Pluck comes back, but again, these little changes still always make the track feel like it's moving forward. First verse sounding different from the second verse, even just as simple as changing the bass pattern from what you heard in the drop to keep it moving forward, and to not low passing the kick anymore. Plucks are in, and then we're doubling up on atmospheres here in a second. A few extra effects over here, and the hi-hats come back in. Moving forward, drums are here. This pluck is really nice right here. Where's that pluck? Okay, I actually found it. I actually have it in orange. I wish I had this in blue because it's this pluck I think this is the delay on it. That's a sample. I must have recorded it a 1/3 delay, but this pluck actually changes things quite a bit. Instead of getting this simple pluck over here, you hear that? Again, super simple pluck. You get this one with a 1/3 pattern on it. I actually really like that plug. It makes things really interesting. And one more time. This time the build-up sounds a little bit different. To be clear, there is no build-up, right? You go from something like this to just movement, just progression. Kick gets dropped. Few high passes here. And again, as I mentioned earlier, the end of that bass line just does a really good job of transitioning from, from phrase to phrase. You hear it one more time right here, that just kind of kicks in, that the end hits right there. And goes straight into the second drop. So, movement. Now, let's talk about the second drop real quick. Here we introduce more notes. I mentioned that the first part of the track is literally all one note, except for the occasional sub that goes from here to D sharp. Kind of arbitrary. Here we get that movement going. We change the pattern a little bit, and that's going to be super important so that the second drop feels distinct to the first. You're going to notice a few more effects here, a little bit more noise. This hit is actually something that's going to be there every 4 bars. That gives it more impact, and that's going to play a big role in making the track a little bit more interesting. But again, you get that difference in pattern. Let's take a listen to that pattern actually. All right, this is what you're working with here. A little bit of movement, a little bit more kind of grooviness, especially right there. And it's mostly similar, but a lot more movement. Let's take a listen to that one more time, starting right here, one of my favorite parts. And with that riser, makes it so much better. All right, so now we're grooving. Now we got some bounce. Very gritty, especially with the difference in notes that we're gonna break down in 1 second. Take a listen. Perks come in. Listen to this. So what's going on here? This is, I get so nostalgic listening to my tracks because I appreciate this so much. And this is one of the reasons I like doing these breakdown videos, because there's little details in the track that I just appreciate so much, and I want nothing more than to just share with the world. So take a look at these patterns. You'll notice that this bounce 2, which is just the same bounce, just with this different pattern with more notes, is repeated right here. This one is the same as this one. This saw is actually pretty long. It covers the entire track. But the point is this. You'll notice differences in notes. Let's zoom in. Hopefully you should be able to see this pretty clearly. I mean, even right off the bat, you see the bounce, the saw, and the deep all hit at the start. And then there's the extra saw note. There's some differences in the patterns here. They're not just all the exact same pattern layered on top of one another, but it really adds a lot of groove when, let's say, there's 2 saw hits, and right here, these are different. There's 2 here, 2 on the bounce, 2 on the deep, 1 on the saw, down, then it gets repeated, and then right here, there's an extra hit on the deep. Moving forward, everything's layered, everything's the same. We get an extra hit on the saw right here. You can see that right there versus this gap on the bounce on the deep. And then you get some gaps here on the deep and extra hits there. And again, everything is changing. There's a few little plucks here and there from the saw, and those little plucks really contribute to the movement a lot more. So take a listen to that one more time with everything. I'm not going to solo them. Yeah, you should be able to hear that, and again, it's really nice. Gives it so much more groove. Speaking of groove, let's talk about some of the things that happen on accidents, right? Some happy accidents. Here we're looking at when the drums kick in, the second phrase of this drop. This actually happened on accident. I kid you not. You'll notice that this bounce 2 is the exact same pattern, but it's shifted over half a beat. I was messing around with how I wanted the second drop to go, and again, I wanted to keep things interesting and groovy because it's a minimalistic track. And at one point, I must have shifted the pattern over half a beat. And when I hit play and I heard it, I thought, what did I just do? Why does it, like, it sounds good, you know? And that's actually how I made the second part of the drop go. Is I shifted the bass line over, and you will hear that difference. Take a listen to this part right here, where it's the same bass line but shifted over half a beat. Again, there are some changes in the saw pattern. I mean, extra hits like we talked about earlier here, the bounce, the saw, and the deep all hit right there, and then an extra saw here. A few changes, a few extra saw hits. For example, right somewhere. For example, right here and all that stuff. But it's the exact same. Other than that, it's the exact same bass line, just moved over. Take a listen real quick, and you'll notice right here it moves. And then back to normal. Extra saw hits right here. Right, so that accident right there changed the groove entirely. You almost can't even tell it's the same bass line because it sounds so different when the kick hits in a different spot. Instead of the kick hitting at the start of the bass line, the kick hits first and then the bass line comes in. It almost sounds completely different even though it's the exact same thing. Anyways, extra saw hits. You hear these drums come in, a few more effects, a lot of noise on the second half of the drop, on the second drop compared to the first. This impact here, every 4 beats, every 4 bars to keep things interesting. And then you go into the last part of the drop, which is back to the not simple bounce, but back to the original kind of positioning of the pattern, except with a ton more extra hits. Here you'll notice it's a different pattern. You got bounce number 2. The saw has been different this entire time, and the deep is pretty much the same right here, but it covers quite a bit of the drop. So it's unique in its own way. And actually, you'll notice that it's a different part that's aligned versus the start that's aligned here. It's kind of halfway through that's aligned there. But again, you're back to that original positioning, but with a lot more movement. I mean, even that bounce has a ton more extra hits than on bounce number 2 that you see over here. Let's take a listen. A lot more bounce. And right here is going to be a big difference in each pattern. Real quick, I actually really like this part as well, where you get that extra deep hit. All the bass lines kind of go away, but that extra deep hit right there, it adds a really unique characteristic to the end of the drop, where here earlier you get all these extra hits and there's so much more bounce, and then everything gets taken away, just an extra deep hit. Right here. And then the outro. And actually you can tell it's the exact same bounce 1, but moved over half a beat. So kind of use that trick again. Don't tell anyone, it'll be our little secret. But anyways, then you get to the outro. Just the kick, bass lines there. No effects either. But it almost sounds like a new bass line. Kick gets drops here to make it feel more like an outro. And you are there. So again, a lot of different patterns here. It's all about the little details that really make this track, A, feel like it's moving forward, and B, have that groove kick in and kick in progressively more as you keep going. A little bit of the mixing. I know I talked about some of the mixing on the bass channels, but I mean, that's really all there is to it. There's not going to be a whole ton of mixing on these drums or on these effects. Again, as we move forward, there's going to be a lot more mixing involved because I'm going to have synths and leads and pads and a bunch of other stuff. But anyways, when we're looking at the mixing here, by the way, these are my reference tracks, so you can ignore these. If we look at the mixing here, you know, some EQs. What is this? A clap bus that looks like it has some distortion on it. Sound goodizer as well. That's what you want to see. Again, when did I make this track? Let's take a look at that. I should have made this track, started it in the beginning of 2022. It's actually pretty, looks like it was started, I remember my Fake ID remix was released, I want to say in January. So, and it must have already been finished and mastered at that time. So I pretty much finished my Fake ID remix and started this track right after. You'll notice other tracks I started kind of sporadically and maybe even spent more time on this. But I mean, I started this and I finished it through and I submitted it for distribution. Again, this was meant to be my debut track. So it was started on January, so a long time ago. We are currently in 2024, June of 2024. So my mixing techniques have hopefully improved, but even then you'll see in my next track that my mixing is, I'm going to say it's, it's suboptimal, because I went from mixing something like this to something very, very full with a lot of super sauce in it. But mixing here and on the Fake ID remix wasn't all that hard. I mean, I hope it sounds pretty good quality because it's just a few bass lines. I spent a lot of time kind of really dialing in these sounds, but once these were dialed in, everything was pretty much set. So again, you have those hi-hats, everything's sent to a bus. Yeah, everything's sent to a bus with apparently nothing on it. That's what you want to see. Okay, some atmospheres, a ton of effects here. And this is just the audio for the video, so you can ignore this. But again, not much going on. Only 48 mixer tracks. I will say, I tend to average around 50, and recently I've been kind of pushing closer to 60. So this has a lot of mixer tracks, but 20 to 48 are all effects, and these drums are pretty standard. But these are all effects, so you'll notice how that you'll see how that changes in future videos. In any case, again, the other thing we didn't really talk about much are all these effects. They're pretty much thrown in there as I see fit. Looks like, we even have some reverbs and things like that these are actually should be reverse reverbs. Yeah, so when making a track like this with very few effects, I had to get really creative, and I recorded a lot of reverbs and things like that, and just parts of the track with basses and things like that to just fill in the space here and there. So quite a few reverse reverbs here. And other than that, just pretty standard noise and hits all over the place. So that's about it. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you have any questions. If you haven't heard the track beginning to end, again, it's on all streaming platforms. So Spotify, Apple Music, all those. Go ahead and check it out. Don't forget to like and subscribe. There are going to be more breakdown videos coming soon. And just kind of as a heads up, this is the last track, not only for a while, but actually the last track. The last kind of house track, and I would say normal track that I'm going to be breaking down. Everything else gets really melodic and really, I would say, almost emotional to a certain extent. And things are going to change. Things do a complete 180 from this track to my next track. So I hope you enjoyed this. There's not going to be any more house track breakdowns, because not only as of right now, as of June 8th, 2024, have I not released another house track, I also haven't made another house track. Maybe that'll change. I'll see. I'm working on a few other things right now. But again, everything's going to take a complete 180. I hope you enjoy what's going to come next. Again, you're looking at, if you've listened to my discography, you're looking at Exposition, you're looking at Express, you're looking at, what was after that, Progress, and Release, which will be out actually a week from, today's Saturday, and it's going to be out on Friday, almost a little bit less than a week from today. So again, all those tracks are going to be kind of coming through that are completely different to what we just broke down here. But I'm excited. Those are the ones where I really expressed myself, made music with intention, even though this one had its own form of intention, right? To be my debut track, to be minimalistic, and to really be focused on that groove in subtle ways. These three patterns right there, changing the bass line, the progression from this part of the verse to this part. So again, it was intentional in its own ways. But things really get interesting, at least in my opinion, because, I'm really passionate about the tracks that come next. Things really get interesting after this, so definitely stick around. Again, don't forget to like and subscribe. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments, and I will see you all next time.